Good evening, everybody. Today we have with us Sridhar Vemuri, MM 2005. And today is a topic which is all dear to our heart about our own emotions. And Sridhar will take us to a journey of regulating and monitoring our emotions. So over to you, Sridhar. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. With marketing as my specialization. And subsequently, I have taken finance as my second specialization. And after that, I worked for 10 years in banking industry. And all those 10 years, actually, I have actually been involved in the setting up of the strategic business units, operationalizing them, building teams, building business, being responsible for quality and audit. So, and I worked on both sides of the balance sheet, and I also teach banking at some of the B schools. And so when I came to AIM in 2004, I had 10 years of experience in banking. And then after I graduated in 2005, I had a few options to get into either technology or into commercial banking or into investment banking. So I chose to get into investment banking, wanted to learn. And for the rest of my career, actually, I have spent in there. And I've worked across the trade life cycle. I worked for asset management companies, also worked for other investment banks, and also custodian banks and tech firms. The last corporate role that I have played was as a senior director for financial clearing operations with Cineverse Technologies, which is the world's most connected company. And I was also heading the Hyderabad location. So while I was pursuing my corporate career, I constantly used to get a feedback that I'm good with managing people, building good teams, and my teams have always been successful and all that. While I always thought I was fortunate, my bosses and my colleagues and my teams used to always say that I have special ability in that. So I started believing in that and started creating, that created interest in me. So what I did, so I said, okay, why not I become a life coach or an executive coach at some point in my career? So to begin with, so about 3 years back, I started, working in that direction. So I did my MSc in psychology from University of Madras. And then I have done my brain-based coaching certification from Neuro Leadership Institute, which is also, approved by International Coach Federation. And yeah, so that is, so that actually, was kind of readying me for what I eventually wanted to become. So last year, I left my corporate, career, and I wanted to set up something of my own. And so I upskilled myself, cross-skilled myself, certified myself. And early this year, I've started my own, venture by name Excel and Exceed. Plus, I am also actually, last 3 years, I'm associated with an NGO by name Seva, wherein we provide free, and confidential counseling services for people with emotional issues. So I am their volunteer as well as a general secretary. So, so this is an introduction about me, and so getting into the flow of the presentation. Yeah. So the flow of the session would be something like this. We will talk about the emotional health scenario before COVID-19 situation. And then we will also talk about what could possibly be the impact of COVID-19 and what could be the need to regulate emotions. And for us to regulate emotions, we need to understand emotions. And then we need to also understand the basic construct of the human brain, how the emotion and the rationality are processed. And then we will also try to understand as to how the brain views the world, and in the absence of any informed choices, how humanity, deals with anxieties and stress that happens with them. And that is essentially defense mechanisms. And finally, we'll get to review some of the techniques to regulate emotions. So the World Health Organization says that 1 out of 4 people in the world actually at some point or the other need some assistance to, manage their emotions. Essentially, 1/4 of the population is vulnerable for mismanaged emotions, and as a consequence will suffer ill health and disability. Coming to the current statistics, there are about 800 million people in the world and who have emotional disorders as on today, which is roughly 11% of the population. And India alone has got a staggering 200 million people in it. And WHO also says that what causes these, disorders, it says that, severely stressful events do cause them. So a stress sometimes need not be there in the environment. Sometimes the stress can be perceived also. So it is said that, at a workplace or at a personal space or even in the society, we can feel a lot of stress, and as a consequence, we can experience emotional disorders. And similarly, dangerous living conditions where there is no safety, no sanity, and people work in an extremely hazardous environment also could be one of the reasons. And the exploitation that is on the basis of social, economic, factors would also lead to that. And of course, coupled with that is the poor health. And so the World Health says that what is inhibiting the detection of mental disorders is that negligence. And negligence, when coupled with stigma, it inhibits treatment. So people who have been already detected are not properly getting it treated because of the stigma attached to it. Now, so WHO also says that it is always important to regulate it at a transient stage rather than, wait for a acute stage or a chronic stage to kick in. Because at that stage, you require medication and supervision, and it could take something like, a midterm or sometimes a long-term, medical supervision is needed. Moving on to the next slide, we just have seen, what is the scenario in the world currently and what impact the COVID-19 situation could have on it. And one of the strong impacts that I can see in COVID-19 kind of situation is that there is going to be a tremendous innovation in the way we learn, the way we work, the way we transact and communicate. And hence there is a tremendous need to, accept the change, adapt to the change, and acquire newer skills. These become imperative. So those who are a little slower on this would find it really challenging to keep up with the pace. And other important impact of COVID-19 situation would be on socio-economic aspects. The world GDP is estimated to suffer $9 trillion, which is greater than 10% of the whole world's GDP, which is around 87%. And in the USA alone, there are 47 million job losses estimated in Q2 2020. Unemployment in the US is at all-time high of 32.1%. And let's compare it with what happened in 2009 Great Recession, wherein 10.2% unemployment rate was recorded, and in 1933 Great Depression, 24.9% unemployment rate was recorded. So you can observe that the current situation can possibly create a tremendous socio-economic disorder. In India alone, there are 40 million jobs that are already lost in informal sector. And overall job losses that are expected to be there in India is roughly 140 million. Now, let's look at the other impact of COVID-19, that is on emotional and physical health. The American Psychological Association, in its report dated 4th May 2020, reveals that emotional health impacts can be long-lasting. Like, for example, panic attacks, excessive anxiety, depression, and substance abuse. All these were noticed in 2013 for reasons that can be attributed to the Great Recession in 2009. And the APA also says that emotional health impacts will be uneven. It says that the socio-economic factors will severely, impact the emotional health of people. For example, somebody at 10 percentile, socio-economic status would have far lesser impact on their emotional health, far more, impact on their emotional health than somebody at a 75 percentile of, socio-economic, status they enjoy. And at the same time, the health inequalities may deepen because the existing inequalities will get widened and deepened. And unemployment and suicide rates are linked, especially for men. And the American Psychological Association says that what is the way to combat this? The way to combat this is to see this as an experience and learn from it and then grow from it. So with this being the kind of situation we are all in, it becomes important to regulate the emotions. And before we talk about regulating emotions, understanding the emotions becomes imperative. So what are emotions? Emotions are neurophysiological reactions triggered by stimuli that can be either, internal or external. I'll explain that just a little later. Let me move on. So there are 8 dimensions of emotions in 4 pairs. Happiness versus sadness, anger versus fear, trust versus disgust, surprise versus anticipation. So these are 8 dimensions to emotions, and they can be put in 4 pairs. So there are also secondary emotions, like they're called combined emotions, like excitement, right? And excitement, for example, I'm just out of college and I got a job, and it's the first day of my work and I'm driving to work. How do you think I must be feeling? I must be feeling happy. Plus, I must also be feeling certain amount of anticipation. So that admixture of emotion is called excitement. So there are primary emotions, there are secondary emotions. Then the 3 key elements of emotions are subjective experience, physiological response, behavioral response. So coming to subjective experience, as I explained a little while ago, it has got an experiential dimension to it. And it can come in its purest form, or it can come in an amalgamated form, like I explained before, where one emotion gets mixed up with another emotion, it can form a different emotion altogether. It will be a very subjective and like I said, has got an experiential dimension to it. Now, let me go back to the definition of emotion as neurophysiological reaction. When I say neuro, I'm talking about neurons in the brain. There are 100 billion neurons in the brain, and each neuron will make some 7,000 connections with another neuron. Imagine the kind of information the neurons process, and the kind of responses that they will facilitate. And not only that, neurons also generate chemicals called neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters, for example, dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, that that increases your motivation levels. Anybody with high motivation level is supposed to be having a high dopamine. Like for example, Aditya, one of our office bearers here, does work with such kind of motivation, and I'm sure that he has high levels of dopamine. So going back to the definition, so an emotion would have a neuron connect where the chemicals that get generated. The example that I gave was of a dopamine, and a physiological response. Physiological reaction means when you are extremely fearful, you could start sweating, or there could be sweat in your palms, or there is an enhanced heartbeat, or there could be a goosebumps. So that is the physiological response. So emotions are those where the neurotransmitters generated by neurons get generated, plus it will also trigger bodily reactions, which is called physiological reactions, all as a response to a given stimuli that could be internal or external. So going to the second element of emotion, that is physiological response. I just explained to you how we panic, how we sweat in the palms, how there is a heartbeat, goosebumps. These are all physiological response. And the behavioral response could be that when you see something scary, you sweat a lot and you are frightened and you could possibly run away. And so that is a behavioral response to it. and behavior is what we say and do. So moving on to the next, now let's look at the construct of the brain. Let's look at the construct of the brain and as to how brain processes the emotions and also processes the rational aspect of the life. Now, so the cortex, you can see the word prefrontal cortex there. That has a word cortex. The cortex is like a sheet of cover on the brain, which is 1/10 of an inch thick, and the prefrontal cortex is that part of the cortex which is very small, of course, in size, which is placed behind the forehead. The prefrontal cortex has no more than 4 to 5% of the brain volume. And it is the last brain region to actually get developed. So that is the basic difference between human beings and animals is this. The level of rationality that is developed in human beings is all there with PFC. And like I said, it is very interesting that it is the last part of the brain to actually get developed. And PFC consumes something like 1/3 of the brain's energy, total brain energy, despite it being just 4 to 5% of the entire brain's volume. Now, what does PFC do? PFC controls the working memory. It supports decision making and problem solving. So it is that rational mind that is at work, that is entirely determined by the functioning of prefrontal cortex. Now let's look at limbic system. Limbic system doesn't refer to any one particular part of the brain, but it refers to multiple, parts of the brain, and that is all called a limbic region. And this region is responsible for fight or flight response. And so it constantly ascertains whether a particular thing is harmful or not. And it accordingly it decides to fight or flight. Either fight a particular situation, or you run away from that situation, or the third possibility is to freeze, fight, flight, or freeze. So typically when there is arousal in the limbic region, the emotions are flared up, and emotions actually don't leave much resources left for the PFC, which is your rational mind. They leave very little of glucose, very little of oxygen for the PFC to function. That's why when we are extremely panicking, when we are very anxious, we are unable to think. And that's because of this reason. And so what is very important here is to balance both our limbic as well as our prefrontal cortex. Now let's move to that aspect of the brain, how the brain perceives the world. So, and what drives the human behavior? Brain's organizing principle is to preserve. It processes threat 5 times more than reward. So threat creates an away state. An away state means going away from it. When you feel threatened, you want to go away from it. So that's called an away state. So away state and toward state are the two functional states created by threat and reward, respectively. So when you feel threatened, you go away from it. That is, you make an away decision. Because when you feel threatened, the limbic gets aroused and the fight and flight response kicks in, and we suddenly become problem focused. Like I was very much focused to get connected to share my screen a little while ago. Right? So suddenly we become problem focused, and the number of options, opportunities, and the number of resources that are available to us cannot be integrated well at that point of time. Some of the examples I can give you were, the fear, anger, frustration, how you panic, all those. Now, let's talk about the toward state. That is a reward state. This state motivates, this inspires, and this makes you solution focused. Meaning that, like for example, when you are elated, when you are thrilled, when you are joyous, when you are curious, there is so much of possibility that you can use all that is available to, to make it a successful thing, be it your options, opportunities, resources, everything else. Now that said, let's move to that part of us which we are consciously not aware. Human beings have survived some millions of years, have survived many situations, many threatful situations, without consciously knowing. They have unconsciously, practiced a defense mechanism, and that's very popularly known as defense mechanisms. And defense mechanisms, we will discuss a little bit now. And defense mechanisms lead to maladapted behavior, and maladapted behavior leads to psychological disorders. So if you ask, depending on defense mechanisms, is not very healthy way. There are definitely healthier ways to deal with it. And any which case, like I said before, defense mechanisms are very unconscious way of manipulating, distorting, denying the reality to avoid dealing with the stress or anxiety of a situation. When we are very anxious of a situation, when we don't know how to handle it, we unconsciously manipulate, distort, and deny the reality. And so, like I said, it leads to maladapted behavior and to psychological disorders. So let's quickly review what are some of the defense mechanisms that humanity resorts to, although unconsciously. Repression. Repression is also called motivated suppression. When you are not able to deal with an anxiety or a stress of a situation, you push it to the unconscious. For example, a child, in his childhood, if he has seen a lot of abuse, when he grows, quite possible that he forgets all of that. But he has challenges to form good relationships. Now, coming to denial, it is to ignore or refuse an unpleasant reality. That's what we do when we hear a shocking news. We refuse to believe it because we don't know how to process it. And of course, we're not doing it consciously. It happens unconsciously to us. That's what is denial. And projection. Projection is, there are certain aspects to us which we know are not good, and we feel very vulnerable. We feel anxious acknowledging that we have those qualities. So what we do is we instead attribute those onto others. One example that I can think of is when you switch on a television, watch a news, you see the news anchors, constantly insinuating, accusing politicians of being, resorting to favoritism. And that's the example that I can think of projection. What we don't like in ourselves, we put it on to others. And reaction formation is hiding uncomfortable feelings and thoughts by behaving in exactly opposite form. That's called reaction formation. For example, let us say we hate our boss a lot, but however, we are worried that, if he gets to know, we will have it. So what we do is that we portray that, we love him so much through our behavior. So that is a reaction formation. What we are versus what we portray are exactly opposite, because we don't have courage to actually, portray what we really are, what we really feel. Sublimation is socially acceptable form of defense mechanism, if you call one. We all agree that, aggression is not good, and displaying aggression in a society is definitely not a normative behavior. But think of sports. Sport is where, aggression is fairly, regimented, fairly, put within a certain rule structure, certain framework, and aggression is allowed. So this is a very hypothetical example I'm giving. There can be many other examples. So sublimation is that aspect of us which we want to do it so in a socially acceptable manner. Then coming to think of rationalization. Rationalization is, we know certain things that we feel or behave is not nice, but we justify them in a very logical manner, right? So, and for example, a habitual drinker would always like to tell himself that, he had a very long, hard day, and that's why he needs those 6 or 16 pegs. This is rationalization. So these are the various defense mechanisms that human beings unconsciously resort to. So, like I said, defense mechanisms are not good, and in a long-term perspective, because they lead to definitely disorders. And so, what is the right way to deal? Now, let's look at it. So, this is called emotion regulation. So, emotion regulation, as the name suggests, is to deal with your emotions and regulate them. And there are two branches of strategies. The first set of strategies are called antecedent strategies. So these strategies happen before the emotional response kicks in. So you're not dealing with an emotion. You are actually dealing that at a situation stage itself. A few strategies that I can think of are situation selection, situation modification, attention deployment. Situation selection could be, for example, there is this guy whom you just don't like, and there is a party that is going on, and you know that this guy is going to come there. So what do? You either you choose not to go there at all. No, alternatively, there could be some guy whom you really admire and you love, like to spend time with him, and this guy is going to come for that meeting or that party. What would you do? You would definitely attend that. So situation selection essentially means, you select a situation basing the emotion that you want to undergo or not. Now, let's look at situation modification. Situation modification is where you accept the situation. For example, let's go back to the same example where Mr. X, whom we don't like, is turning up for a meeting, but you decide to still go. And what do you do there? You modify that situation so that you feel comfortable, so you feel emotionally stable, nice, by saying just hello to him and minimizing the interaction with him, and moving on, and then catching up with all others. That's one example that I can think of. And the third one is attention deployment. Attention deployment is choosing certain aspects of a situation. You choose certain aspects of a situation and focus on them. For example, in a given situation, there are a few aspects to it. You just focus on them, and while ignoring all the others. So these are the antecedent strategies, and the other strategies are response focused strategies. So these are done after the emotion has already kicked in. So when the emotion is already underway, you actually practice this. The first one of that is expression. So expression is where you express your emotion, but you express in a manner that is socially acceptable, respectful to the other individual. Then you have a satisfaction of venting it out, but in a respectful manner. But however, if your emotion runs high when you do this, or the emotion of the other guy to whom you are expressing also goes up, then it can lead to certain amount of social friction. So expression is really good, but sometimes it can have some some flip sides. But however, it has to be practiced in moderation. The other one is suppression. Suppression is intentionally ignoring or forgetting an event. Intentionally forgetting an event or ignoring an event. The example that I can think of is that of Mahatma Gandhi. In My Experiments with Truth, his biography, he had mentioned that when he had come back from London to his hometown, he had realized that his mother had already passed away. And she had passed away possibly an year back, a little more or maybe a little less. And they have not informed him, because in which case he cannot come from London because he has to travel by a ship, and it takes about a month and a half to 2 months. So he then said that he chose to forget about his mother's death. And he chose to believe that she is still in the village. And that's what it was mentioned. So I'm thinking about that to serve as an example here for suppression. The final one is a cognitive change. Like cognition, we spoke about it, is predominantly controlled by the prefrontal cortex. So cognitive change has got certain techniques called labeling technique, reappraisal techniques, and mindful techniques. Now let's go and check them out. As the name indicates, the labeling technique is about labeling an emotion. When somebody experiences a huge emotion, then if he has to recount the whole experience, there will be a lot of drama that is involved in it. One of the shortcomings of explaining about your emotion in detail is that it has a trigger effect. The more you explain, the more you will get sucked into it. So it is always nice to describe your emotion in a word or two, because you are putting a name to it. You are giving a label to it. It becomes that, And the second one is capture the cause. So what is your emotion? What is causing it? If we can write that in the form of a sentence, a very hypothetical example is, I feel angry because I didn't get hike, is one example. If you care to observe, when you do the labeling, there is no solution that you are thinking about. You are just giving a name to it, giving a reason to it. And oftentimes, doing just this can reduce our emotions by 30% to 70%. I'm not saying in all cases, but in some of the cases, it can definitely bring down. And for that, it is important to have a strong emotional vocabulary, So you can see a small list here. It is not an exhaustive list, but it is a, just a small list that I can think of, So you can see that the list is mentioned, the degree with which the emotions are displayed, strong, medium, light, that talks about the degree of the emotion. Toward and away essentially talk about a positive emotion or a negative emotion. You can see, for example, a strong toward decision or a strong toward emotion is delighted, exhilarated, inspired, optimistic. Similarly on the other side, on the away side, angry, panicked, devastated, overwhelmed, and so on and so forth. You can look at the medium, light also for toward and away states. So let's move on to the reappraisal technique. So reappraisal technique is another of the cognitive change techniques that can be practiced. So what is reappraisal? Reappraisal is to look at a situation differently, positively, for greater understanding. You look at a situation from all dimensions so that you have a better information, you are positive about it, you're open about it. So that is a reappraisal technique. And the following 5 are the reappraisal techniques. The first technique is called a normalizing technique. And normalizing is to ask yourself, I feel angry about a particular thing. Is it appropriate to think in a situation like mine? For example, I didn't get a hike this year, so I feel extremely annoyed. So the question that I should ask to myself is, okay, should I feel annoyed when I don't get a hike, especially in a situation like this? Is it appropriate to think? Do others also think like this? That ability to reflect on your emotion, that is, we are thinking about our emotion. We are not getting emotional about our emotion. So the next one is reprioritizing. Reprioritizing is reviewing a situation from an overall priority. Look at your overall priority in life, then list out your individual priorities, then stack rank them. So when you feel emotional about something, then see, what priority, bucket does it fall in? That makes things a lot easier because you have a perspective already. The third one is called a repositioning, where we see it from a third person's perspective. There could be a mentor or there could be a friend whom we really admire for his wisdom. Seeing things from his perspective. Okay, if Nikhil is in my position, how would he like to see it? Or if, for example, Aditya is in my position, how would he like to see this? Is one way of putting others whom we really like and admire and see that from their perspective. The fourth one is distancing. Distancing is making ourselves the third party. We make ourselves a third party, put ourselves on a high pedestal and just sit down and then watch your own drama, your own situation, your own emotion. You just watch it as if you were a third party. Then what happens? The very act of doing this oftentimes will reduce your arousal in the limbic, will reduce your need to judge, will enhance the objectivity. And finally, let's look at the reframing. In every situation, is there something positive that I can possibly learn? Can I derive a positive meaning from this situation? When your emotions are running high, can I learn something positive from this situation? Is an example, right? So for example, I said that, I didn't get a hike, I'm extremely unhappy. So how do I derive a positive meaning from it? Okay, I might not have got a hike, but I at least could keep my job in a situation like this. It is deriving a positive meaning. And let's move on to the next and the final cognitive, change technique. That's mindfulness. I think mindfulness is the most spoken about technique in the recent past, and mindfulness is also taught in some of the top B schools across the world. And mindfulness is to not focus on the past or on the future, but just to focus on the present in a very open and accepting way, right? And just observing your emotion and experiencing your emotion fully, and telling yourself that you're not the emotion. And you also practice to respect, love your emotion. So here what we are doing is, we are not adding our value judgment at all. We are not refusing emotions. We are not saying this is right or wrong. We are not thinking about past. We are not thinking about future. We are just accepting the present, focusing on the present. We are keeping our horizons open in an accepting manner. We just let our emotions come. We observe our emotions, experience them, respect them, but we know that we are different from the emotion. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. But before I can take questions, I would like to, do a, 20-second recap of what I said. So we have, through this presentation, seen how important it is to regulate emotions, and there is no better time than now. And the regulating techniques that we have learned are, the antecedent strategies, where you talk of a situation, modify a situation, and then you work on some of the aspects of a situation. Then we spoke about, response, focused techniques, where we spoke about, expression, suppression, and cognitive techniques like labeling, and then reappraisal, those 5 techniques, and mindfulness. So that said, I strongly believe that humanity will progress leaps and bounds, particularly because of this this COVID-19 situation. Because historically, when you see, whenever a situation that is that brings us to a existential crisis, the humanity has progressed like never before. So I fully believe the humanity will progress a lot. And however, we are in a transition stage, and how we deal with this transition stage decides how far we go and how fast we go. And the very purpose of this meeting, of this presentation from my side, is to is not to discount that some of the techniques are not known to you. I fully believe that some of the techniques you are already practicing, and possibly some of you know all the techniques. But by talking about them now, I am trying to bring it to the collective consciousness of all of us, so that we can practice it, we can benefit from it, we can make it a habit, and if possible, we can also impact the larger society by helping them out. I can take questions now.
Yeah, can you just stop sharing the screen? And can you switch on your video? Your video is not on. The first question is from Dr. Rajshekhar Reddy. In the current COVID situation, to what extent can the government trust the rational behavior of our citizens and relax the lockdown and count on them for self-regulating capacity of social distancing?
So if I understand your question, you are saying, why don't you leave it for the people to decide what they should do?
Yeah, I mean, that is what he's asking me.
Oh, great. No, no, I'm just paraphrasing so that I get the question right. Yeah, so I mean, it works both ways. If you have observed in the first place, when a framework is put in place, it was done with an intention to create infrastructure and also to reduce the doubling rate. You know, that was why government has put a structure in place and did not take their opinion and instead enforced it. The second stage is where now it is up to the rationality of people how they will follow it. And to be very honest, as a country, we are not very rule abiding as such. But even otherwise, there is nothing wrong in leaving it for people now to decide what they will do. And we have given them inputs, you know, that they should follow the sanitation, the distancing, and also other hygiene factors that they have to take care of. So I think both of them are still happening. I mean, enforced and followed by leaving it for people's rationality.
The question from Vijay Sarda: how can SME implement cognitive techniques of emotions among its employees, especially when most are not above higher education?
Okay, so these techniques, how they will impact the employees, even if they are not educated. Actually, this has got nothing to do with education. And trust me, this has absolutely nothing to do with education at all. So, and so, I mean, we can actually, this is nothing but the first step of emotional intelligence is to gain self-awareness and then self-management. If you see, I mean, what we are saying is getting more self-aware. In fact, this session is more about being self-aware about our own stuff. Then the second one is to manage ourselves. For this, there is no need for education to happen. And telling about this itself can become a very good education. So in my personal view, anything that we teach people, any skill that we teach that gets them a job, but cannot help them to manage themselves, possibly is not a complete education. So their academic qualifications don't really matter. These inputs, if given to them, you will see that the teams are really, you know, better.
Venu, you can go ahead. Venu, one sec. I am not able to unmute you. Go ahead, Venu. Go ahead.
Am I good?
Yeah. Only question, huh?
Yeah. Sorry. Babai, nice to hear from you.
Sure.
But only one question.
Yeah.
We understand that emotions actually run very deep. Very deep. It has nothing to do with personal or business perspective, right? Now, how do you balance between the two of them in such a way that the business is not impacted because of your emotions?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, see, you're saying one aspect of my life should not be impacted because of emotion, while other I can afford. Actually, it is not like that. It is us who have compartmentalized our life, and life has not compartmentalized it, to be very honest, right? And so, I mean, in the pursuit of, you know, compartmentalizing life, we have complicated it. We are the same person. We have the same value system. You don't have a different values at home and different ones at workplace, right? So when you have emotions, and if you know how to recognize them and how you will deal with them, then it doesn't matter whether you are at a workplace or at home or even at the society. It simply does not matter. It is us who have created that distinctions. Emotions do not. For that matter, let me tell you this, and it's important for me to tell this. The brain does not recognize between a physical pain and a social pain, right? So pain simply does not discriminate. So when it cannot discriminate the pain itself, it will not discriminate your workplace to your personal space to your society.
There's a very interesting question from Ramesh. Has the time come for India to legalize marijuana?
Sir, that's Ramesh Gelli, right?
No, not Ramesh Gelli. No, it's different Ramesh.
Okay. Any which case. So, so no. Honestly, I don't have a great understanding about it, to be very honest. And I've not done too much on the substance abuse to understand it. Even if I have some understanding, possibly that is not enough for me to make a comment on it. Or possibly I will study that and respond at some other time.
I don't know why, but most of the questions are coming from your Hyderabad people only. Next is Vasu Rao. To reach large-scale mindfulness, the government needs to promote or practice it. Do they have neurocognitive psychologists on their teams? and which country or government is doing something in lines of mindfulness?
Sir,
Yes.
first point, you don't need psychotherapist, psychoanalyst to do mindfulness, sir. And I can quote UCLA, USA. They have a research center, right? And there they have practiced, they have taught, mindfulness to students, and they have done a lot of research. And mindfulness need not be the specific domain of psychiatrists or psychoanalysts at all. A normal teacher who has done a respectable certification is enough to do it. And I think it is time that we all kind of institutionalize these kind of programs, mindfulness. And one good thing that I can tell about mindfulness is it is also called direct experience. Okay, and I know some of the people in this group are very much into meditation for many years, and I know them. So I can understand that their very limbic arousal will be very low because they practice meditation also for so long. So we require normal teachers. We don't require some super skills to teach these, and people will very fast connect, and people will definitely practice. And I have seen this from my own experience at my workplace. I've always brought in these interventions.
There's a question from Jaskira. He's talking most of the nomenclature. When man is a social animal, why not use a term physical distancing instead of social distancing? The terminology.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it is a nomenclature also. See, social distancing, when I don't know, I mean, I'm making a guess. It is not I who coined that word, to be very honest. But I can give you I possibly think why they say it could be because when you get into a society, you do distancing. At home, you're not practicing it, right? Although a family is a small representative section of the society, but when you get into the society, you have to practice distancing. That's why we call it social distancing with people whom you don't know or people whom you don't live with. And that's why it is called. It is not so much about physical distance because in which case we are not practicing physical distance at home. That's what I'm thinking. It's not I who coined that word, but this could be the reason.
There's another question from Mr. Mohan, again from Hyderabad. Excellent. My response of focus strategies, whether it's expressive or suppressive, is probably navigated by whether I am an extrovert or an introvert. How do you, as my manager, spot my strategy approach? Guide me. Mr. Mohandas.
No, can you repeat that for me, please?
You want to put the earphone because that's why I asked you. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
I mean,
right?
the question was long.
Okay. The question is simple, that how, as a manager, you can spot my strategy approach, because am I expressive or suppressive is probably navigated with what my personality is. So how do you as a manager can guide me and spot that strategy?
Okay, I mean, to be very honest, the interventions that other can bring to you will make you self-aware. So others will not tell you who you are, but they can bring you certain interventions through which you will know who you are and where you are. So I would possibly Mr. Mohan, I would possibly help you with an MBTI, Myers-Briggs transactional, personality type index. It's called MBTI. So I would possibly help you do a MBTI. Then you would know whether you are an intuitive person or a feelings person, introvert or an extrovert. All that. Your personality type. There are 16 personality types. You would get to know what your personality type is. And moreover, it is not I as a manager who will decide what your strategy should be. It is you who will decide whether you want to express your emotion in a respectful, in a socially acceptable manner. So be it. If you want to suppress it, like I said, like willfully forgetting something, so be it. But the point is, you need to know where you are. What is your personality type? So once you know it, then you know what to do. So I as a manager will only facilitate that assessment, nothing more.
Yeah, Rishabh, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question here, and I don't really know too much about this topic, but I've heard that the physical composition of our brain has a lot to do with how our outward personalities are. So, for example, I've heard that to take an extreme example, a serial killer for as an example, maybe a serial killer not just because of what his education or background or his physical influences are, but from how his brain is structured and mapped. So since you said in your introduction that you've done a bit of cognitive behavior and study and about the brain, and also I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Thank you.
In fact, what I had said was that how the predisposition of the brain, everybody's brain, by the way, is what I mentioned about, right? To minimize the threat and minimize the threat. Reward is much later. So on the priority list for a brain, reward comes much later. In fact, I have to explain that, lust is the biggest toward state driver, lust. On the other hand, fear is the biggest away, driver. But when both of them are put together, fear is 5 times more processed than lust. So I just wanted to tell people that, it is brain that is programmed to see fear. So bad is stronger than good. Now coming to a serial killer, honestly, I have not done any study or I have not read much as to what makes a serial killer who he is. But one thing I can tell you, but I'm not super sure about it. The construct of our personality, this is said by Freud, Sigmund Freud, who is called father of psychology. He said that man means women included. Man has 3, basic constructs in him. One is called id, ego, and superego. Id means pleasure seeking. It seeks, I want this. And ego essentially talks about rationality. And the superego says morality. But generally speaking, the people who are into serial killers, the reason why you said serial killer is because it has become a habit for him. Generally, for people for whom crime is a habit, their superego is almost non-existent, meaning their morality aspect of the personality is almost non-existent.
Today we have a Cambodian alumni. She is the head of the Cambodian Alumni Association. Rachna, you want to ask a question? Hello. There is a...
Hi everyone.
Hi Rachna, go ahead.
Yeah, so actually today is my first time to join Zoom meeting. So actually I don't have much question. I just want to say hi to everyone and thanks for sharing the link meeting about different topics. So yeah, so yes, only this thanks to Nikhil, the head of the FAIM, and the other Sydney alumni at AIM. Thank you so much. Only this.
I didn't know that. Okay, fine, thank you. There's a question here from 2 more questions and then we are, the question is from Darshan Shalaka. Can you share some thoughts on the synergy between AI and mindfulness, thinking to create BOTs to work with people on their stressful and other mental issues?
So you're saying that how do we integrate AIM and mindfulness, is it?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I spoke about mindfulness, some of the top B schools in the US, they teach mindfulness. And if I can make a, guess, even ISB has got that. And so definitely, yes, mindfulness can become definitely part of a curriculum in AIM. And I'm very confident that since AIM does wonderfully well, whatever it does, so if it introduces mindfulness, it would do it wonderfully well. And it should be done for sure. And mindfulness has got nothing to do with spirituality, nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with cult.
There's a question of Rajan. What is the starting point to practice mindfulness?
I mean, from a time perspective or from a personality perspective or what? Any time. I think you can start now.
Thank you, Sridhar, for a very engaging discussion on cognitive emotions. It was very nice. And as a test case, you also made us understand